At my wedding, my wife's bodyguard was wearing the same suit as me. He was standing to one side. When I was saying my vows, he suddenly stepped forward and slapped me. I covered my face and looked at my wife Amelie. She looked calm, as if she knew this would happen. Seeing that she was not reacting, the bodyguard smirked and slapped me again. Blood trickled from the corner of my mouth. The guests below the stage were flabbergasted, even as rage burned within me. Call the police. You can't call the police, Amelie finally said. My parents also suddenly shouted. No one is allowed to call the police. Anyone who does would be opposing the Bennett family. I got slapped at my own wedding, and my wife's bodyguard was the one who did it. Amelie Darren was standing before me in her custom-made wedding dress and smiling gently. Her expression was warm. Right then, a figure suddenly sped over from her side. It was Cole Martin. Before I could react, there was a sharp smack, and the left side of my face burned with pain. I was stunned. I covered my cheek as I looked at Cole in astonishment. Have you gone mad, Cole? Rage rose within me, and I subconsciously wanted to shield Amelie behind me. She was not in a state to be frightened like this. A ruckus immediately started up below the stage. When I looked over, the blood seemed to freeze in my veins. My father was looking down into his glass, while my mother had turned her face away. They did not make a single sound in protest. Why? I asked as I tried to suppress my anger. Cole ignored me and pointed at my feet. Mr. Bennett, where did the mud on your shoes come from? The mud on my shoes? I looked down at my shoes. They were shiny and made of leather. There was not a speck of mud on them. What kind of nonsense are you spouting? He was making no sense. There's mud there. Cole's voice was steely. It's red soil from the back garden. The back garden? I had not gone there at all today. After accompanying Amelie to her prenatal checkup, I came directly to the hotel. Cole, Amelie began. She took a step forward and clutched my arm in a protective stance. Eli's shoe might have gotten muddy from our stroll this morning. It's just a small matter. Did you have to slap him? Although it seemed like Amelie was defending me, she was instead confirming that I had gone to the back garden. I looked at her in confusion. Amelie immediately put her hand to her lower abdomen, as if in reminder to me. Her action made me temporarily relinquish my suspicions. Cole glanced at Amelie and said tauntingly, "A small matter? You'll never get rid of something so dirty once it's on you." The words stung. Below the stage where the guests were, the gossip reached a fever pitch. He hit the groom because of some mud? He must be nuts. What's going on with Elijah's parents? Why aren't they saying anything when their son just got slapped? The way that bodyguard looks at the bride gives me a funny feeling. The more I heard, the more frustrated I felt. When I looked over at Amelie, her face was pale. This whole incident must have scared her. I could not keep holding back. Call the police, I yelled, pointing at Cole. Call the police now and have him locked up. You can't call the police, Amelie shrieked. She grabbed my arm. Her nails were cutting into my flesh. There was a panicked look in her eyes that I had never seen before. Elijah, you can't call the police. Think of it as doing a good thing for the baby. Don't escalate things. What did she mean by that? What kind of excuse was that? Before I could retort, my parents abruptly stood up at the head table. No one's allowed to call the police. My father, Roger Bennett, roared. My mother, Margot Bennett, agreed in a sharp voice. Anyone who calls the police will be going against the Bennett family. I was frozen in place. I looked at my parents, who were both defending Cole, and then at Amelie, who still looked at me pleadingly. I turned to look at the guests below the stage, who all found this weird. This whole thing was absurd, and I was overwhelmed by how alone I felt. What were they so afraid of? Rather, what were they hiding from me? Seeing how messy things were getting, Cole smirked. He raised his hand and cruelly tried to slap me again. Don't, Amelie cried out. She instinctively wanted to intercede, but she stopped when Cole flashed her a glance. I stood in place as I watched the hand descend on me. Meanwhile, the people I loved stayed unmoving. My heart sank. This slap hurt, but not only physically. Worse was the shame of the circumstances and being watched by a crowd as I was hit. As Cole pulled his hand back, I felt the blood rise to my head. Curse you. I was completely enraged. I threw all my manners out the window and lunged at Cole. If I let this insult stand, I would become the laughingstock of Jansburg. However, the second I moved, my father rushed to my side. He grabbed my arm tightly. His grip was so unexpectedly strong that it hurt. It did not seem like he was trying to talk me out of doing something rash. It felt more like he was apprehending me. Eli, calm down, he growled at me lowly. His expression was dark, and veins stood out on his temple. Calm down? How in the world am I supposed to calm down? I tried to shake him off as I glared at Cole. He slapped me at my own wedding. Twice. What's wrong with you? Didn't you see that? We can't escalate things more when we haven't gotten the situation straight. Mom came over as well. She stood between Cole and me. Her back was to him as she faced me. Her expression was stern, and there was some panic in her gaze. Mr. Martin must have had a reason to do that. A reason? The absurdity of it made me even angrier. What kind of reason could justify a bodyguard slapping her employer's husband in front of so many people? What kind of reason is so important that it can't be talked about in private? Why did he have to do this today and at my wedding? My voice trembled, and I felt the rage nearly burn through my chest. Well, maybe you really did something? Mr. Martin isn't an unreasonable person. I stared at Mom in disbelief. How was this my fault when I had been slapped? What could I have done? All I had done today was attend my own wedding. What have I done? Tell me then, what have I done? I questioned her. My voice grew louder, riling the guests up once again. Dad tugged me hard and interrupted me. His voice was judicious. Listen to your mother, Eli. Mr. Martin is a professional. He must have spotted something out of the ordinary. Maybe he did that for your safety. My safety? I looked at Cole, who looked serious even though he did something so ridiculous. I felt a chill run up my spine. What had they done? Why were my parents trying so hard to defend Cole? Did they think of me as their son at all? Right then, Amelie came forward. Tears swam in her eyes as she pulled my free arm. She sobbed and said, "Don't do this, Eli. Your mom and dad are right. There must be some kind of misunderstanding here. Cole wouldn't do anything reckless. Don't be angry." Seeing how pitiful Amelie looked, my rage and frustration mixed and became stronger. I felt suffocated. Why were they all looking at Cole? I shook Amelie and Dad off. I pointed at myself and then at Cole. I'll make Cole pay for this if it's the last thing I do. I fished out my phone, ready to call the police. Then Amelie slapped me. It was not a hard hit, but the insult stung harder than the slap. I looked at her in disbelief. She cried as she said to me, "Eli, stop throwing a tantrum." Then Dad became livid. He shouted, "I'll disown you if you dare to make that phone call." Mom came up to me and snatched the phone. Her voice was shrill as she said, "Are you intent on embarrassing the Bennett family before all of Jansburg? What will people think of us if you call the police over such a small thing? What will they think of you?" I saw the open panic on their faces and felt even more desolate and helpless. I felt as if I had been doused in cold water. I was shivering. Right then, Cole made a move. He only took a small step forward. His icy gaze was locked on me, and he was unwavering. It was as if that intense fight before had nothing to do with him. He raised his hand again and made to slap me for the third time. I was frozen in place as I watched that hand come closer. My loved ones seemed unaffected. They were simply allowing this to happen. My heart was caught in the depths of despair. I did not even have the strength to avoid the slap. As Cole's third slap was about to land, I watched my parents, who were holding me down with panic and a warning in their eyes. They did not seem bothered that I was going to get hit. My heart was cold, and I did not bother to duck. I even thought that Cole should hit me. At least that way I could see what happened next, and try to figure it out. In the split second before the slap landed, someone squeezed between us. It was Amelie. She flung her arms out wide and shielded me with her back. Her voice was tearful but strangely firm. "Enough, Cole. You can't keep slapping him." Cole's hand stopped in midair, just a scant inch from the back of Amelie's head. I looked at Amelie before me and felt my heart clench. I did not know what I was feeling in the mess of my emotions. The resentment and suspicion I felt toward her just a while ago faded. In the end, Amelie was still my wife. When it mattered, she still cared for me. Dad and Mom seemed to relax, but still they held me in place. "Move aside, Amy," Cole said in a low voice. His tone brooked no argument. "I won't. Even if Eli did something wrong, you can't just hit him. This is our wedding." Warmth spread in my heart. I was about to say something when Amelie kept speaking. "Eli, Cole has been with me for so long. He wouldn't hit people for no reason. He really must have noticed something important. Think about it. Where did that mud on your shoes come from? Did you go somewhere you shouldn't have? What was this about the mud again?" The rage I had suppressed came flaring back. "I did not go into the back garden. How many times do I have to tell you that? There's no mud on my shoes either," I yelled. The feeling of being blamed for something without justification was driving me insane. "Look at him. He won't tell the truth even now," Dad said. Mom agreed immediately. There was a heartbroken look on her face. "Eli, you have to admit your mistakes. Stop denying it." I stared at them and watched how they played along with each other. Then there was Amelie, who was standing before me and seemed to be defending me. However, she also kept bringing the topic back to the mud and the back garden. I suddenly felt a pulse of fear. They were in on this together. The thought cemented itself in my head and made me feel cold all over. I was shaking in rage and my tone shifted as I said, "You don't believe me, do you? You all think I should be slapped, right? Let go of me. I'll call the police myself. Let the police take a look and see who here has gone mad." This time, I struggled even harder, and Dad nearly failed to hold me. Amelie suddenly moved to face me. Her face was streaked with tears, but her gaze was strangely sharp. Her clear voice cut right through my angry howl. You disappoint me, Elijah. She paused. Her gaze swept over my leather shoes meaningfully. Then, she looked abruptly at Cole. Cole, call the police, she said clearly. Her words were like an explosion, making my ears ring. I was frozen in place as my blood seemed to turn to ice. What was she talking about? She was asking Cole to call the police. Was it so that they would arrest me? Had she not been defending me just a second ago? Cole shot a meaningful look at Amelie, and it held a kind of intimacy that I did not understand. Without saying anything, Cole took out his phone and tapped on it. The ringing of the phone was like a hammer to my chest. You can't call the police, Dad yelled. His face was white. Hang up. Mom was panicked as she tried to snatch the phone from Cole. However, it was too late. Cole put the phone to his ear. He did not even look at my parents. He kept staring at me as he said calmly into the phone, "Hello, police? I would like to make a report. We're in the ballroom of Wintervale Hotel." He paused, and his gaze landed on my shoes again. He smirked. The groom's shoes are muddy. The reasoning he gave for making a police report was absolutely absurd. The police thought it was a prank at first, and even lectured Cole about abusing public resources. However, what Cole said next made everyone panic. Cole's voice was deadpan, completely devoid of emotion as he spoke into the receiver. Because the groom's shoes perfectly matched the bloody footprints next to the corpse we just found buried in the red soil of the back garden. The ballroom plunged into a terrifying, suffocating silence. The clinking of glasses, the murmured gossip, the rustling of expensive fabrics, everything stopped. Then chaos erupted. Screams tore through the crowd. Guests scrambled backward, knocking over chairs and shattering champagne flutes. "A corpse?" someone shrieked. "Elijah killed someone?" I stood there, my ears ringing so loudly I couldn't hear my own breathing. A corpse? In the back garden? My gaze snapped to my father. He was practically vibrating with a mix of terror and grim resignation. My mother had buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking, though I noticed she wasn't making a single sound. No sobs. No genuine grief. And Amelie, my beautiful, pregnant wife. She was looking at Cole. Just for a fraction of a second, the corner of her mouth twitched upward before she collapsed to her knees, burying her face in her hands. "Elijah," she wailed, her voice echoing perfectly through the cavernous room. "You promised me. You said you only went to the garden to talk to him. You said you wouldn't hurt my uncle." Her uncle? Arthur Darren? The patriarch of the Darren family, the man who had vehemently opposed our marriage because he believed I was after the family trust? "What are you talking about?" I roared, stepping toward her. "Amelie, look at me. I haven't seen Arthur in months. I was with you at the clinic all morning." Cole immediately stepped between us, shoving me back with a hand flat against my chest. "Stay away from her, murderer." "I didn't do anything," I shouted to the murmuring crowd. I looked down at my feet. "Look at my shoes. They're spotless. There's no mud. They are setting me up." "Of course those are spotless," my father said. His voice trembled, but his words were precise, rehearsed. You changed them in the dressing room before you walked out here. You made me hide the dirty ones." I froze. I stared at the man who had raised me. "Dad, what did you just say?" My mother looked up, her eyes dry but her expression twisted in feigned agony. "We wanted to protect you, Eli. We really did. We told Mr. Martin to keep quiet. We thought we could cover it up for the sake of the baby. But hiding a murder? We can't go to hell for you." The air was sucked from my lungs. I was trapped in a nightmare. The gaslighting, the slaps, the public scene. It all made sickening sense now. Cole slapping me wasn't a random act of aggression. It was theater. It was designed to draw everyone's attention, to force a public confrontation about muddy shoes before the police even arrived. It created a narrative. By slapping me, he made himself look like the righteous, outraged protector. And by defending him, my parents cemented my guilt. They had delayed me here on the stage just long enough for someone to plant evidence. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. I looked at Amelie. She was still weeping on the floor, but through the gaps of her fingers, her cold, calculating eyes locked onto mine. There was no love there. Only the gaze of a hunter watching an animal bleed out in a trap. "You're all in on this," I whispered, the realization settling into my bones like ice. "You're actually framing me." "Don't make it worse, Mr. Bennett," Cole sneered. 5 minutes later, the doors to the ballroom burst open. Dozens of police officers swarmed the room. 2 officers grabbed my arms, twisting them behind my back with brutal efficiency, while a detective with a hardened face marched straight toward Amelie. "Ma'am, are you the one who called?" "My bodyguard did." Amelie sobbed, leaning heavily against Cole. "My uncle, please, you have to check the back garden." "We already have units out there," the detective said grimly. His radio crackled. "Detective Vance. We've got a 187 in the garden. Male 60s. Looks like blunt force trauma to the back of the head." "And Vance?" "We found a pair of men's leather shoes in the groom's dressing room, covered in red clay and blood." Vance looked at me with pure disgust. Elijah Bennett, you are under arrest for the murder of Arthur Darren. You have the right to remain silent. As they dragged me out in handcuffs past the hundreds of whispering guests, I looked back one last time. My parents were comforting Amelie. Cole had his arm wrapped tightly around her waist. Too tight for a bodyguard. Too intimate. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The burning rage inside me didn't extinguish. It condensed. It turned into something sharp, dense, and absolute. I was going to destroy them all. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and bleach. I had been sitting handcuffed to the steel table for 6 hours. Detective Vance tossed a manila folder onto the table. It slapped against the metal with a sharp crack. He opened it, revealing crime scene photos. Arthur Darren. His skull was caved in. He was lying half buried in the distinct, rust-red soil of the Wintervale Hotel's back garden. Beside that photo, Vance placed another. A pair of black Oxford shoes. The exact brand and size I was wearing. They were caked in red mud and dark, dried blood. Your father handed these over to my officers, Vance said, leaning over the table. He said you forced him to hide them in a duffel bag in your dressing room. He broke down crying. Elijah. A father turning in his own son. Do you know how hard that is? He's lying, I said. My voice was hoarse, but steady. I never saw Arthur today. I was at the Greenwood prenatal clinic with my wife from 8 a.m. until 11:30 a.m. The wedding started at 1 p.m. I came straight to the hotel. Checked the clinic's cameras. Vance scoffed. We did. The cameras at Greenwood were down for maintenance this morning. Convenient, right? My heart skipped a beat. Down for maintenance? That wasn't a coincidence. Amelie had insisted on that specific clinic. She had planned this down to the minute. Your wife, Vance continued, states that you left the clinic early, around 9:30 a.m., claiming you had to meet someone at the hotel to sort out a catering issue. She says she took a cab back alone. She's lying too. Everyone's lying except you? Vance shook his head. Let's talk motive. Arthur Darren controls the Darren Family Trust. He was notoriously strict. 3 days ago, he filed paperwork to remove Amelie from the will, citing his disapproval of you. If he signed it, your new wife would lose access to a $500 million fortune. But he died before the ink could touch the paper, making her the sole heir, and making you the husband very rich. I stared at the metal table. $500 million. Arthur had always hated me. He thought I was a gold digger. But the truth was I loved Amelie. Or at least, the version of Amelie she had presented to me. I had a decent tech startup. I wasn't starving for cash. But compared to the Darren fortune, I was a peasant. If I killed him for the money, I said quietly, why would I bury him at my own wedding venue? Why not dump him in the river? Because he surprised you, Vance countered. He showed up at the hotel to confront you. Things got out of hand. You hit him with a shovel from the landscaping crew. You panicked, buried him shallowly, changed your shoes, and went to get married like a psychopath. I closed my eyes, piecing it together. Amelie and Cole had killed Arthur. Or maybe Cole did it under Amelie's orders to secure the inheritance. But they needed a fall guy. A scapegoat who could take the blame so the inheritance wouldn't be frozen by a criminal investigation against the primary beneficiary. Me. And my parents? Why would they betray their only son? Check my parents' bank accounts, I said softly. Vance frowned. What? If you want to know why they're lying, check their accounts. Check offshore transfers. Roger and Margot Bennett. They wouldn't sell me out for free. Vance stared at me for a long moment, then gathered the photos. You're a cold bastard, Elijah. Trying to pin bribery on your own folks. Your lawyer is outside. I don't have a lawyer. The door opened. A woman in a sharp gray suit walked in. She carried a sleek leather briefcase and looked at me with piercing blue eyes. I'm Evelyn Cross, she said, not offering her hand. I've been retained as your defense counsel. Vance scowled. Cross, you're high-end corporate. Since when do you slum it in homicide? Since my client pays my retainer, detective. I'd like a moment alone with him. Vance glared at both of us before walking out, slamming the door. I looked at Evelyn. Who hired you? I know I can't afford you. She sat down, opening her briefcase. Arthur Darren's personal assistant, Mr. Hayes. He doesn't believe you killed Arthur. Hope, fragile and sharp, flared in my chest. Why? Because Arthur didn't come to the hotel to confront you, Evelyn said flatly. Arthur came to the hotel to confront Amelie. He had proof she was having an affair. I exhaled slowly. The missing puzzle piece slid into place. Cole. Exactly. And if Amelie is convicted of murder, or if the marriage is annulled due to fraud before Arthur's death, the trust defaults to charity. Mr. Hayes wants the real killers behind bars. But right now, they have an airtight frame job on you. Your parents just gave a sworn statement that you confessed to them in the dressing room. I let out a dark, hollow laugh. My parents. They really had sold me for slaughter. Get me out of here, Evelyn. Get me bail. The prosecution is arguing flight risk, she said. But I have a judge who owes me a favor. It'll cost $2 million. Hayes is posting it. But Elijah, once you're out, you have a target on your back. If they realize you're building a case against them, they won't hesitate to put you in the ground next to Arthur. I looked at my bruised, clean hands. Let them try. I need to get to my apartment before they scrub it. Bail was granted 48 hours later. When I walked out of the precinct, the Jansburg paparazzi swarmed me. Flashes blinded me, and microphones were shoved in my face, asking how it felt to murder my wife's uncle. Evelyn's security team pushed us through the mob and into a black SUV. Amelie holds the narrative, Evelyn said, handing me a tablet as the car sped away. She gave an exclusive interview yesterday. I pressed play. Amelie was on screen, wearing black, looking devastatingly beautiful and fragile. She wept as she spoke to the interviewer. I loved Elijah. I thought he was a good man. But to know he killed my uncle, to know he did it for money, to secure my inheritance, it sickens me. He manipulated my parents-in-law into covering for him. Thank God my bodyguard Cole noticed the mud on his shoes. Cole saved my life. Who knows what Elijah would have done to me and my baby? I turned the tablet off. Her baby. It's Cole's, isn't it? We suspect so, Evelyn said. Arthur had hired a private investigator a month ago. We believe Arthur obtained DNA proof or photos, which is why he was going to cut her off. But the PI's office was broken into the night before the wedding. All files were wiped. They were thorough. I had to give them that. Drop me off at my apartment, I said. It's a crime scene. The police tossed it. I don't care about the police. I care about my personal server. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Server? I run a tech startup that specializes in smart home security and data recovery. I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Amelie thought I was just a code monkey. She forgot I designed the firmware for half the security cameras in Jansburg. When I entered my apartment, it was trashed. Drawers were pulled out, cushions slashed. But they hadn't found the false panel behind the HVAC vent. I pulled out a small, encrypted hard drive. I plugged it into my laptop. What is that? Evelyn asked, looking over my shoulder. My dashcam footage backs up to this server via cloud whenever my car is running. I explained, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Amelie said I left the clinic at 9:30 a.m. and took my car, while she took a cab. I pulled up the timestamp for the day of the wedding. 9:30 a.m. The video loaded. It showed the view from my car's dashboard, parked outside the Greenwood Clinic. But the car wasn't moving. At 9:45 a.m., two figures walked out of the clinic and into the frame. Amelie and Cole. They weren't acting like an employer and a bodyguard. They were holding hands. Cole kissed her deeply, his hand resting on her pregnant belly. Then they got into Cole's black sedan parked directly across from my car, and drove off. She left without you, Evelyn murmured. Where were you? I was still inside, paying the bill and picking up her prenatal vitamins at the pharmacy, I said, rewinding the footage. My car didn't move until 10:15 a.m. This proves she lied about the timeline, Evelyn said, her eyes gleaming. But it doesn't prove she killed Arthur. It just proves she had an affair. No, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Watch this. I fast-forwarded to 11 a.m. My car was now parked in the VIP underground lot of the Wintervale Hotel. At 11:12 a.m., the dashcam captured a reflection in the polished concrete wall opposite my parking spot. It was distorted but clear enough. Cole's black sedan pulled up near the service elevator. The trunk popped open. Cole got out. And another man stepped out of the passenger side. An older man. Balding, with a slight limp. Evelyn gasped. Is that my father? I said, feeling a fresh wave of bile rise in my throat. Together, Cole and my father hauled a heavy, rolled-up Persian rug out of the trunk. A pale, lifeless hand hung from one end, dripping something dark onto the concrete. I sat back, staring at the screen. My father helped Cole transport Arthur's body. He wasn't just bought off after the fact. He was an active accomplice in the cover-up. Why? I whispered. Why would my own father do this? Money makes people monsters, Evelyn said softly. I'm sorry, Elijah. I didn't want her pity. I took a deep breath, locking my emotions away in a dark, secure vault. This footage is circumstantial because of the reflection. A good defense attorney would claim the video is doctored or too blurry for a conviction. So what do? We don't go to the police yet, I said, pulling the hard drive. If we give this to Vance, Amelie's lawyers will tie it up in court for years. They might even flee the country with her inheritance. No, I'm going to make them confess. I'm going to tear their lives apart in front of everyone, just like they did to me. 3 days later, the Darren family hosted a massive memorial service for Arthur at the Jansburg Grand Cathedral. The irony was sickening. The murderers were throwing a lavish funeral for their victim. It was an invite-only event for the city's elite. Naturally, I wasn't invited. I adjusted the collar of my black suit. Evelyn sat across from me in the surveillance van parked a block away. She was adjusting the frequency on the earpiece I wore. "The hidden camera in your tie clip is transmitting," she said. "Hayes has control of the cathedral's audiovisual system. When you give the signal, he'll patch your feed directly onto the massive screens they're using to display Arthur's tribute video." "And the police?" "Detective Vance is in the congregation. He thinks he's there to protect Amelie from you. The second they admit to anything, Vance will have no choice but to act." I nodded. "Let's go." I slipped out of the van and walked toward the cathedral. Security was tight, but I knew the blind spots. I bypassed the main entrance, picking the lock on the choir's side door. Inside, the cathedral was cavernous, filled with the scent of lilies and the soft hum of weeping strings. Hundreds of Jansburg's wealthiest sat in the pews. At the front, Amelie stood at the podium. She wore a bespoke black dress that tastefully highlighted her baby bump. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Arthur was more than an uncle to me," she was saying, her voice echoing mournfully over the speakers. "He was a guiding light. And to know his life was violently stolen by the man I thought I loved. It is a pain I will carry forever." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Sitting in the front row were my parents. They looked uncomfortable but wore designer mourning clothes. They were already spending their blood money. "Amelie," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet, solemn space, it carried perfectly. The entire cathedral turned as one. Amelie froze at the podium. Her eyes widened, the mask of grief slipping for a fraction of a second before she morphed it into pure terror. "Elijah," she gasped, taking a step back. Instantly, Cole stepped out from the shadows near the altar, his hand reaching inside his suit jacket. For other security guards moved to intercept me, but I kept walking down the center aisle, my hands raised and empty. "Elijah Bennett, you are violating your bail conditions," Detective Vance shouted, standing up from the third row, his badge in hand. "I'm just here to pay my respects," I said smoothly, not breaking eye contact with Amelie. "To my dear uncle-in-law. And to my loving wife." "Get him out of here," my father yelled, standing up. "He's dangerous. He's a murderer." "Am I Dad?" I stopped halfway down the aisle. "Is that why you helped Cole carry his body out of the trunk of his car at 11:12 a.m. on my wedding day?" Dead silence fell over the cathedral. My father's face drained of all color. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. "You're insane," Amelie said, gripping the podium. Her voice shook, but she projected it perfectly. "Detective Vance, arrest him. He's having a psychotic break." "Amelie, why was the clinic's camera system down?" I asked, taking another step forward. "Why did Arthur's private investigator get his office firebombed the night before our wedding?" "Shut up," Cole barked, moving toward me. "Hayes now," I whispered. Instantly, the mournful slideshow of Arthur on the massive screens above the altar cut out. A collective gasp echoed through the church as the screens flared back to life, displaying crystal-clear video footage. It was my dashcam video. First, the scene at the clinic. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Amelie, the grieving widow-to-be, passionately kissed her bodyguard, Cole, caressing her stomach. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "That's the bodyguard. Is the baby his? Turn it off." Amelie screamed, abandoning her composed facade. "Turn the screens off." But the video skipped forward. 11:12 a.m. The underground parking garage. The reflection on the wall was undeniable. Cole and my father, struggling under the weight of a bloody, rolled-up rug. Arthur's pale hand dangled in plain sight, his custom gold Rolex watch glinting in the fluorescent light. The same watch Arthur had worn in a dozen magazine photos. The cathedral erupted into total pandemonium. Guests stood up, screaming. Detective Vance stared at the screen, his jaw slacked, then slowly turned his head to look at my father. My mother grabbed my father's arm. "Roger, what is that? What did you do?" So, my mother hadn't known the full extent of it. She only knew about the money and the fake alibi. My father had kept the gruesome part to himself. "It's a deep fake," Cole roared, pulling his gun and pointing it directly at me. He doctored the footage. "Nobody move." The sight of the weapon sent the crowd into a stampede. People threw themselves under pews. Vance drew his service weapon. "Drop it, Martin. Drop the weapon now." I stood my ground, my heart hammering against my ribs, but I didn't flinch. I stared at the man who had humiliated me, hit me, and tried to ruin my life. "You're trapped, Cole," I said coldly. "The police have Arthur's body. They have the rug. Now they know to look for trace DNA from your trunk. You left fibers. You left blood. You're done." Amelie was hyperventilating, backing away from the altar. "Cole, do something." "Shut up, Amelie." Cole snapped, his composure entirely gone. He looked at Vance, then back to me, his hand shaking. "It was her idea. She swung the golf club. I just helped her clean it up." "You bastard." Amelie shrieked. "You said you would protect me." "Protect you? You said it would be a clean inheritance. You didn't say Arthur was bringing the cops into it." It was beautiful. Under the pressure, The rats were tearing each other apart. Roger Bennett. Vance barked, keeping his gun trained on Cole. Hands behind your head. My father fell to his knees, sobbing hysterically. They made me. Amelie said if I didn't help, Cole would kill me too. She transferred $10 million to my account. I was scared. I just wanted to survive. I looked down at the pathetic, weeping man who had once been my hero. You survived, Dad. But you're dead to me. Drop the gun, Cole. Vance yelled again. Sirens were blaring outside. Backup was arriving. Cole's eyes darted wildly. He realized it was over. But instead of dropping the gun, a vicious, feral look crossed his face. He locked eyes with me. If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me, you smug prick. He pulled the trigger. Bang. The gunshot deafened me. But I didn't feel the impact. Someone had slammed into me from the side a split second before the weapon discharged. I hit the stone floor hard, my shoulder screaming in pain. I looked up. Detective Vance was grappling with Cole, twisting the gun away. Another officer had tackled my father. The bullet had shattered a stained glass window behind me, raining colored shards over the pews. Get off me. Cole roared, but Vance struck him hard across the jaw with the butt of his own gun. Cole collapsed, blood spurting from his mouth. I pushed myself up. My ears were ringing. The cathedral was swarming with uniforms. Amelie was trying to slip out through the sacristy door. Stop right there, Mrs. Bennett. Evelyn's sharp voice rang out. Evelyn stepped out from the shadows of the side corridor. Two uniformed officers right behind her. Amelie backed away, her face pale, the elegant morning dress now looking like a grim prison uniform. Don't touch me, she hissed at the officers who grabbed her arms. I am a Darren. You can't do this to me. I'm pregnant. I walked slowly toward her, crunching over broken glass. She looked at me, and for a moment, she tried to slip back into her old persona. Tears welled in her eyes. Her lips quivered. Eli. Eli, please. They forced me. Cole threatened me. I loved you. You know I loved you. Please don't let them take me. I stared into her eyes. I searched for any lingering trace of the woman I thought I had married. There was nothing. Just a void of narcissism and greed. You never loved me, Amelie, I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through her lies like a scalpel. You needed a shield. Someone naive enough to marry you quickly so Arthur wouldn't disinherit you before the baby was born. But Arthur found out anyway. And when you killed him, you realized I was the perfect scapegoat. I'm carrying a child, she screamed as the handcuffs clicked tightly around her wrists. Then I hope Cole enjoys his conjugal visits, I replied, turning my back on her. Elijah, don't walk away from me. I'll destroy you. I'll spend every dime of the trust ruining your life. Her shrieks echoed through the cathedral, growing fainter as they dragged her out to the waiting squad cars. I walked back down the aisle. My father was on his knees, his hands cuffed behind his back, weeping uncontrollably. My mother was standing a few feet away, paralyzed with shock, staring at her husband as if he were a monster. Eli, my father choked out as I passed him. Son, please. I'm your father. I stopped. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel sorrow. I just felt an immense, hollow exhaustion. My father died today, I said. I walked out of the cathedral and into the crisp, cool Jandsburg air. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the pavement. Evelyn was leaning against her SUV, a faint, approving smile on her face. That was quite the show, Mr. Bennett. Is it over? I asked. For them? Yes. The dashcam footage, the financial records of your father's bribe, and Cole's confession under pressure, it's airtight. They'll all do life without parole. Arthur's assistant, Mr. Hayes, is securing the trust. The money will go to charity, just as Arthur intended. She opened the car door for me. And what about you? She asked. I looked at the city skyline. I had lost my wife, my parents, and my reputation in a single brutal weekend. I had been dragged through hell, slapped, humiliated, and framed for murder. But I had survived. And I had burned my enemies to ash. I'm going back to work, I said, stepping into the car. I have a security company to run. And I think business is about to boom. The SUV pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing red and blue lights behind. I didn't look back. There was no need. The past was buried in the red soil of the Wintervale Hotel, and I was finally free.